Hi Mushers! Like the first video about choosing a bike for Bikejor, I hope this is a good source of information for beginner to intermediate jorers on how to optimize your bike for bikejoring, and also some better budget tips that still let you prioritize safety. Before we talk about anything else though, we need to talk about brakes. They absolutely must be in the best working condition that you can get for that type of brake. So that means for a used bike or one that was shipped directly to you versus you getting it from a shop, needs to go in for a safety tune-up. And for bikes with disc brakes, they'll need to have a process done called bedding in. Don't be afraid to Google that. It's really a handy DIY skill to have. All right, so now that we've covered stopping, which is the most important, let's talk about seat height and pedaling. So proper seat height for knee extension, for comfort, power, efficiency, all that good stuff is a certain height, and you can read all over about what that is to optimize that. But that's not what you want when you're starting out with bikejoring. What you want to start with bikejoring is to maximize your ability to maneuver around the frame and the wheels for best control and to be able to bail off if needed. So what we want to do is get the seat down and out of the way. Unless you have a really long, drawn-out hill ahead of you that you need to climb up and help your dog a little bit, your dog-powered default should be to put your seat all the way down. And if you don't have a dropper post or can't use it fluidly while you're riding yet, just manually set it there. And if you need to help on a short hill, hopefully there's not too many hills on your beginner tracks, then you can throw in a few standing pedal strokes. I know that can be surprising coming from casual riding or other disciplines of biking, but really when you're off-road riding, and especially when there's a dog attached, your position of most control is going to be standing up on your pedals, not sitting down on the seat. And what that does is it allows you to react so much better to changes in conditions while you're turning. Your speed could change, your traction could change, your dog could choose not to go the exact same direction as you or quite in sync with you. And if you've got that seat up and it hits you in the legs or the knees while you're losing traction, there's just not likely a way that you're going to be able to save that from a crash. So that's why I say, even if you've got a manual seat post, get the tool out, drop it down, just leave it down until you get to a point where the tracks you're using have more hills and more need to pedal. So then you can just be that much safer and more in control to start out with. Speaking of pedaling, you really only want to pedal to avoid jarring slowdowns and not actually to help your team go faster at first. So what that means is that you can free up a little bit of mental space for yourself if you just pick about a mid-easy gear and leave it there for your ride. Just enough that if there's a hill on your training track, that you can help up the hill a little bit, but not so that you're tempted to just sit down and pedal and get caught out at a bad time when a critter or dog surprise happens and you need to react and shift your body weight. And then there's that saying that you can't push a rope. When your dog is learning, even if they already do canicross, there is some generalization that they'll need to do so that they know that they're pulling the bike too. So if you give all of the forward momentum, it can complicate that learning process. So that's just yet another reason to try to keep calm, stand up on your pedals, and forget about the seat for a while. And now speaking of pulling, your first step is to make sure that you're hooked up to the correct spot on your bike for the best control and steering. So I'm going to refer you to another video I have where I covered that pretty well. So in addition to the bungee line that your dog actually pulls with, you're also going to want to have some type of line keeper. And that's to prevent a nasty accident where the line gets wrapped up in any part of the front wheel and it stops you abruptly and pitches you over the handlebars. So this is a spot where you can go cheap and DIY with a little bit of common sense, but if you can, I really prefer these antenna type line keepers. They'll work just that much better for everything from beginner bobbles to high-speed issues where the line can just lag even briefly and things happen fast. So if you can splurge for one of those, I definitely recommend it. The other benefit I really enjoy about the antenna style keepers is that they just make less noise. A lot of the commercial or DIY noodle types, they can make the line sag just enough that it's going to be buzzing on this tire, because the higher your bike tire is relative to the position of your dog's back where the line is actually attached, the more often that buzzing can happen, even just from little lags in momentum from varied terrain, much less with a dog that's new to pulling. Line length can really have a big impact on safety as well. The best brakes and the most expert person using them still needs time and distance to stop. And real physics plus Murphy's Law says that there will be times when you will be going really fast and need to stop absolutely now. And that's whether your dog is always fast and never stops, or whether they're normally fairly slow and predictable. Things just happen sometimes. So to help you visualize the distance that you'll have to stop in that kind of a worst case scenario, think about the length of your unstretched line, and then think about how far out from that attachment point your bike tire extends, and then you additionally have whatever distance that a shorty harness may eat up if it attaches right there next to the dog at the harness. And also the fact that it's not going to be a level line with a bike unless you have a very, very tall dog. So that's even less ground distance that you have to stop. So to put that in context with some actual lengths, with my experience and a not too racy dog, I've always used a 7.5 foot static, 8 foot stretched line on an off-road scooter with 20-inch wheels, and usually a shorty harness on my dog. And he's tall enough that that line is basically level to where it's attached to my scooter. It has mechanical disc brakes with 160 rotors front and rear though, and the small front wheel means that it doesn't take up very much of my stopping distance before I would be running into the back of my dog, which you never ever want to do for obvious reasons. And that also means that with this bike that I've been showing in this video with 29er outer wheel diameter, that same line length and short harness does still feel like a reasonable choice, but that's because it has a lot more braking power and modulation. If that's all Greek to you, that means that a 6 foot canicross line that you already own or a cheaper scooter line in the range of 6 feet long is just not long enough for use in bike touring. And now we're down to the pedals, because I've already talked about how you should be standing up to have best control over your bike for off-road riding in general, and definitely for dog-powered sports. So how do you do that? You need to have your pedals dialed in. It can make for some very nervous rides if you've been trying to ride the cheapy free demo pedals that just came on your entry-level or slightly above mountain bike in the shop, just so that you could ride it around a parking lot. Because especially when there's dew on the grass, these are really slippery. They just don't grip at all. So if you're on a budget especially, composite body pedals with metal pins on them are very affordable and work great. These are going to allow you to be securely on your pedals and controlling the bike when you want to be, and off if you get to that worst case scenario where you need to bail. And both of those factors are key. Toe cages or toe straps are not safe for bike touring. There is no way that if your momentum is getting thrown forward and you're in the middle of a wreck that you're going to be able to pull your foot backward out of those toe cages to reduce the severity of a wreck. So do put that as a priority to replace those if that's what's on your bike. If you can't buy both pedals and optimized shoes all at the same time, work on the pedals first and you can figure out your shoe situation to be a little bit better to interface with the pedals later. Tires are an important part of the equipment equation, and good tire pressure is free. And it's also a number that is very specific to your exact tire and yourself and the gear that you're carrying. So it's something that you really want to take the time to figure out and maintain at the correct pressure for loads more traction and a more comfortable ride as well. So I'm going to refer you to another video again, and we'll move on to the next thing about tires. If you still have a little bit of budget left, and especially if the bike you're trying to work with to optimize for bike touring is not a mountain bike, take a really critical look at the tires. Not only are they, seated properly on the rims and not dry rotted and the rubber's coming apart, you can do things like getting a wider tire, at least 2.25 inches or wider, and get raised cornering knobs, and that will give you a huge increase in traction and confidence while you're trying to learn to bike tour. And a really great way to spread costs out if you need to is to remember that you should always replace the front tire first if you can't do both at the same time. The reason for that is that that's the tire that you're steering with, and that needs to safely get you around corners. So that one's got to have some traction to help you stay stuck to the ground. When you're shopping and you're looking at the dizzying array of different tire types and widths, remember that a fraction of an inch of increased width in a tire gives you an exponentially higher volume tire. And what that means is you get a little bit smoother ride and you have more surface area for traction as well. And while that does lead to some extra drag, the drag is probably not going to hurt you compared to not having enough traction while trying to control a bike with a dog pulling. So always err on the side of that rather than looking towards really ultralight XC racing tires. Using these kid bike tires as an example, they're both a nice width and volume, and there's enough tread for beginner off-road use without a dog attached on either of them. But the ones on the top will be better for traction, confidence, and progression with or without a dog powering you along as well. And if you're really trying to put pearls on a pig, so to speak, make sure that the bike you're trying to put the wider tires on has the clearance in the frame and fork for that, as well as the rim is wide enough so you don't end up with something like a light bulb shape where that tire is going to bend and squish around from the narrow rim. If your bike has it, suspension is what works along with tires and tire pressure to help give you more traction, not just to make the ride less bumpy. So I have another video I can refer you to, a couple actually. You can check the description of this video for more links. But basically, have somebody help you adjust your suspension if you have it, or learn to DIY for yourself so that it's working for you. The better your bike is set up for traction, the easier it is for you to learn how to use that traction and even create more traction when you're out riding on the trail. So that is really a huge help, because traction is what keeps you in control and allows you to use the brakes and your skills to control the speed and just have that much better of a bike touring experience. The next video covers getting you yourself geared up and ready to hit the trail. Hopefully not literally though, so I'll link that here when it's ready.